So in my last video about Evo, I received some comments that I didn't give Street Fighter V a fair shake because I didn't take a look at all the platforms that it streams on and all the international restreams. And also there's been some comments in the FGC that Street Fighter V is kind of diminishing. So what I wanted to take a look at in this video is Street Fighter V dying? So back in the day for the FGC, as long as people were playing the game and hosting tournaments, the game was alive and well. But when we look at the health of a game today, especially through the lens of eSports, there's certain factors we want to take a look at. So what we're going to look at is the viewership of certain Capcom Pro Tour events in 2018 and 2019. We're also going to look at the number of entrants to these events. Then we're going to go to the local level and take a look at Wednesday Night Fights and NLBC. Then we're going to try and peek at what players are actually just playing the game at home. And finally, we're going to take a look at what Capcom's response has been and what seems to be their plans for the future. So for viewership, we're going to look at 3 CPT events from 2018 and 2019. This is going to be from the Asia region, North America, and Europe. And the events we're looking at are CEO, the Mix-Up, Stunfest, and Taipei Major, aka TW Fighter Major. So why does viewership matter? Well, the better viewership you get means you're more attractive to sponsors, and more sponsor money means more prize pool money to attract players from all around the world that put on really good matches, and this also helps fund things like streamers, commentators, and tournament organizers. So with the viewership stats I collected, I just want to clarify a few things. So I took a look at the official Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, and OpenRec streams. I also looked at Fireman Ruby and Spirit Zero. I didn't include all the different player restreams because players like Bonchan and Shen, they might actually be at the event, which could throw it off because then they won't be restreaming. Also, some things like Facebook at CEO Top 8, I couldn't find an archive of, so that's why certain stats are missing. As always, you can take a look at all the stats I collected in the links I put in the description. I also want to say to whatever person who works at Capcom that actually has to collect these stats as part of their reports and job, you have my utmost respect because some of these archives were really hard to find. So if we look at the viewership data, we can see that there has been viewership growth from 2018 to 2019, especially in the Asia region. And the Twitch growth has remained steady. Taipei Major had a bit of a drop, but there has been significant growth on other platforms like YouTube and OpenRec, especially in the Asian region because it kind of caters to Japanese audiences. So what this data tells me is that more and more people are watching the Capcom Pro Tour and by extension Street Fighter V. They just now have a choice on what platform they want to watch it on. So you can't base the health of the game based on just Twitch numbers and Twitch concurrence. What Capcom wants is
complete global saturation.
So now we know more and more people are watching fighting game tournaments, which is good, but it's also important how many people are actually entering those tournaments. I mean, it's the fighting game community, it's not the fighting game concurrence. So let's go back to those same tournaments in 2018 and 2019, and let's see how many people entered Street Fighter. So except for Taipei Major, every event had a decrease in entrants from 2018 to 2019. Now comparing the Mix-Up and Stunfest might not be fair. They happen at different parts of the year and different parts of France. So I actually took a look at Combo Breaker as well. And I was pretty surprised to find that in 2019 there was less entrants for Street Fighter, considering the fact the biggest year ever for Combo Breaker, and they actually hit registration capacity. So the tricky part about using these big major events to determine the health of a game is that these events have become like mini cons. They have 24-hour arcades and wrestling events, so people might come out just to see the spectacle and just join the game for the hell of it. What I think you really need to look at is the locals to determine the health of the game. So I'm going to take a look at some of the most famous locals in the US for Street Fighter V, which is Wednesday Night Fights and NLBC. So the tricky part about Wednesday Night Fights and NLBC is that they can have special events or seasons where more players come out than usual. So what I'm going to look at is the week of July 10th, which is when I recorded this video. I'm also going to look at the week after Season 4 DLC came out. And finally, I'm going to look at the week before Final Round 2018. So looking at the data for both these events, you can see that they've maintained this group of players and they've seen some growth recently. So I took a look at another date in 2017 and this kind of reinforced the fact. However, this isn't the same, at least for Wednesday Night Fights with Street Fighter 4, which had either double or triple the amount of players. So next we got to think about how many people are playing at home. So Capcom's latest financial report stated that 2.8 million copies of Street Fighter V have been sold, and that it's the 4th best-selling fighting game for Capcom, which is pretty impressive considering that it was only released on PC and PS4. But how many of these people are still playing? So the one big roadblock I ran into when making this video is that Sony does not release stats on the amount of players playing different games on PS4. There's this really janky backdoor method called GameStat that used this My Home thing, but the thing is that the stats at gaming was that there was 4.8 million Street Fighter V players and that 50,000 joined in the last week. So let's disregard that, and this is really unfortunate because as we know, the FGC is console based and most of the players are probably going to be playing on PS4. Thankfully, we can get data from Steam, which hosts Street Fighter V on PC. There's this site I use called SteamDB that actually showed me the peak concurrent player count for each day for all time for Street Fighter V. So let's take a look at the same time periods we did for our locals. So we can see here that the game's player base has greatly diminished and has kind of evened out to about 1,300 to 1,700 players daily. Now, despite efforts from Capcom to do free weekends and things like new character releases or new season passes, it has not caused the player base to increase on Steam. So I think it's fair to conclude that Street Fighter V isn't dying, at least as an esport. More and more people are watching and the major tournaments have retained this big group of players to come out. Now on the local side of things and online players, this definitely isn't growing and in some cases shrinking. But the real $1 million question is what is Capcom's response to all of this? The launch of the Capcom Pro Tour in 2014 was a great leap forward for the Street Fighter community. Finally, with Capcom back support, top players could compete for prize pools where they could actually make this their full-time job. Also, people like commentators, TOs, and streamers would get paid for their efforts. However, despite support from big companies like Twitch, Sony, and Razer, the Capcom Pro Tour to this day still relies on the community-based tournament infrastructure. The most interesting recent development has been the establishment of the Capcom Media Ventures unit in Los Angeles, and one of the official responsibilities for this unit is the development of global esports for Capcom outside of Japan. In fact, in 2018, Capcom CEO said that they have a renewed focus on developing esports. So one of the latest projects we've seen from this Capcom Media Ventures unit is the Street Fighter League. And the Street Fighter League has taken a lot of influences from other esports productions like LCS. It's done in a studio, there's teams, and there's character bands. So there's definitely a stronger storytelling emphasis within this league. Players are mic'd up and you can hear them in between matches. There's interviews with different players between matches, and there's these big long player profiles that are written up and posted on the Capcom website. Also realizing that you constantly need to find new players to bring into this league, Capcom has partnered with Super League Gaming to host a variety of amateur tournaments around the US. However, it hasn't been all sunshine and rainbows on Capcom's end. Recently, it was revealed that Capcom was offering huge bounties on Twitch for popular streamers to actually watch the Street Fighter League, which definitely ruffled some feathers in the community. Also going back to that Capcom financial report, it stated that Street Fighter 4 arcade sales struggled and were generally weak due to a shrinking market. Also, Season 4 has generally been lackluster. There's only been one new character, some new costumes, some new stages. However, Ono has said that there is an announcement in August which will most likely happen during EVO, probably around Street Fighter V finals. So my take on all this is I think Capcom has identified that things like new seasons, new characters, new costumes only really satiate the existing player base. And they seem to have kind of dipped their toes into the free-to-play model with the free weekends, but they've seen that this doesn't really grow the player base, it just does temporary boosts. So it seems like what they're doing for their esports business is that they've identified that the viewership can continue to grow. So what they're doing is to try and hook this viewership by developing personalities and changing the way things are presented to appeal to a wider audience that's maybe used to some of the bigger esports presentations. So I'd like to know what you think in the comments. Do you think Street Fighter V is dying? Do you think Capcom's efforts to further esportsify Street Fighter V will work? And when's Marvel? So if you haven't seen my video on what should be the final game for EVO 2019, you can click here. Make sure to subscribe for more FGC deep dives. I've got one cooking for Tekken up next. And as always, rise up.